Hello, my name is John Pascua. Today's date is October 22nd, 2024. This is for lesson number 8 in WFED 105. That's WFED 105, lesson number 8. The content area is construction, layout and construction. Lesson title is layout perpendicular lines to use as square lines, reference lines, also known as reference lines. So our objective today in this lesson as a carpenter apprentice is to be able to understand how to accurately lay out perpendicular lines using the 3-4-5 method. One of the most important tasks as a carpenter is to do layout. As a carpenter, the three main pillars of our building is plumb, level, and square. Square being one of the big three. Before any building can take place, the layout must be done first. Layout is done based on grid patterns. If the layout is not square at the beginning, before any building starts, then the end result will be unsatisfactory. The first step of any layout method is setting perpendicular control lines. This can be accomplished using the 3-4-5 method. Now, the 3-4-5 method is based on the Pythagorean theorem. A little history on this Pythagorean theorem. It's named after the Greek mathematician Pythagoras. Evidence suggests that the relationship between the sides of a right triangle was known in ancient civilizations like Babylon and Egypt, long before Pythagorean, with the Babylonian clay tablets demonstrating that they had knowledge of this dating back around 1800 BCE. However, Pythagoras is credited with being the first to formally state and prove the theorem in a generalized way, making it widely known in the Greek world, and therefore we have the Pythagorean theorem named after it. So laying out perpendicular square lines. The Pythagorean theorem proves that the right angle where the angles intersect, where the largest angle intersect, is 90 degrees. This intersecting point is the angle where the lines are perpendicular. Using the method in the handout established by the Southwest Carpenters Training Fund, we're going to follow these steps to lay out a right triangle. Here we have on the board the 3-4-5 method, which I have here on this handout, establishing the method exactly how we're going to be doing this. It's critical to follow the steps in the order that they're established. Step 1, snap a control line, approximately 10 feet long. I'm going to be using the whiteboard. I'll mark a random line here with my marker along this board at random height off this tray. Step 2, establish points A and B, being 4 feet apart. Step 3, hold the tape at point A, perpendicular to control line, and swing an arc approximately 12 inches long from A to the arc. Step 4, hold your tape at point B and strike an arc that intersects with the arc that we made in step 3. This will establish point C, at which time we can move on to step 5. From point A to point C, snap a line through to intersect. If done correctly, we will have 90 degrees at this point. So I will do this with a tape measure, with a marker. Instead of snapping the line with the chalk line, I will be using the T-square, and I also have a 2-foot square to show that we are in fact square, 90 degrees. It's critical that the steps be followed in this order: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If not, quite possible your square line won't turn out to be so square. This 3, 4, 5 method, as I said before, is a handout created by the Southwest Carpenters Training Fund, used for our 3, 4, 5 method. So at this time, I will use a tape measure and begin the process. So, step 1, snap a control line approximately 10 feet long. We're going to establish this control line with this marker along this whiteboard. That's in the neighborhood of 10 feet long. So, step 2, establish points A and B 4 feet apart. So A is going to be a random spot that I'll pick. I'll choose to be right here. This will be A. Now from A, I'm going to measure over 4 feet. Establish my mark 4 feet. This is now the B point at 4 feet apart. Now, on to step 3. Holding their tape at point A, perpendicular to the control line, I'll make an arc at 3 feet from point A. I'll do that now. Approximately 12 inches. Now, on to step 4. Hold tape at B, strike an arc 5 feet where it intersects the mark from step number 3. It's going to be a little tricky, but I'll stretch out and I'll should be able to get this done. You can see my tape measure from B where it intersects my mark from step 3. Right here is an intersection point. So I'll make a little mark vertical to identify that for us easier to see. So now at this point, step number 5, control from point A to point C. I'll snap a line. I'll use a T-square for this line. Make that intersection. See how it goes. I'm using a T-square to make this mark. Drawing a line straight through A to C. There we go. If this is done correctly, we now have 90 degrees on all 4 sides of this. And let's see how it looks using a 2-foot framing square, carpenter square. See how we did. 2-foot carpenter square, 90 degrees. Put it right up against what we have done, and bingo, 90 degrees square. So this is now our reference point, our reference line where we can lay out anything. Now I'm going to lay out a square using our reference lines. I'm going to lay out a 15-inch square 10 inches away from our reference lines, control lines, square lines, often called several things out in the field, depending on who you're working with. So from our vertical line, I'll measure over 10 inches. And since I've decided to make this a 15-inch square, from this mark, from these two marks, I'll measure over 15 inches for our 15-inch square. Now at this point, I use my T-square to connect those lines. There's one line. Here's the other side. Other side of our soon-to-be square. Now we have our vertical sides of our square. Now from our reference line, measure vertical 10 inches. And since we have a 15-inch square, we're going to measure 15 inches from this point, vertical. $15 and 15 inches. So now, time for me to connect the dots. So now we have a 15-inch square using our reference lines. It's important to understand that our 90 degrees here is critical, needs to be done correctly, because as it's projected off into the distance, it becomes more and more profound. If there's a mistake here, it'd be compounded into infinity. So if we have 90 degrees here and it's done correctly, potentially, theoretically, these lines can extend all the way across the universe and continue to be 90 degrees in all four corners. So that's the 3-4-5 method to lay out reference lines. This is one of the main pillars of the carpenter industry. To be a carpenter, plumb, level, square. Here's our square layout at the beginning. Has to be done correctly. It's infinitely important that it be done correctly, because everything that comes after this is work. Work that happens after this, if it's built incorrectly, laid out incorrectly, you got to tear it down, rebuild it. Costs money. It all costs money. It's all work. It costs money. So now at this point, you'll be headed out to the shop. You'll have your 3-4-5 method. You'll have your sheet. Head out to the shop. We're going to lay out the same thing I did here on the board. We're going to do that on the floor. Start out with a 15-inch square. Then we'll make it bigger. Maybe we'll make a 20-foot square. Or head on out. I'll give you 3 sizes. Your objective is to lay these out within 1/8 of an inch of square. In order to do that, you're going to take your time, follow the steps, and I will be checking that along the way. So once you can prove that you can do that, all 3 squares, square, you'll have accomplished this task. And that is the end of this lesson. John Pascua, October 22nd, 2024, for WFED 105, lesson number 8.